100 Forgotten Memories of Life in 1950s, America. There once was a world where doors didn't need locks, where the family doctor made house calls, and where you could buy a whole bag of candy for just 5 cents. That was America in the 1950s, an era where simplicity concealed incredible community strength. What happened during those golden years? Let's rediscover the forgotten memories from an age where trust was the most valuable asset. $7,400 home prices. In 1950, home ownership was a tangible reality for many American families. The average house cost around $7,400. The crucial thing was that this house wasn't a cramped little box lacking space. On the contrary, you had a spacious yard where the kids could play freely, running around with their radio flyer wagons. Inside, the house featured shiny hardwood floors which constantly needed polishing to maintain their attractive appearance. More important than the physical assets, you had neighbors who actually knew your name, fostering a sense of close-knit community and safety. A livable wage. The average annual salary in 1950 was around $3,200. You could buy a house, raise a family decently without constant worry about debt, and still manage to take a yearly vacation. Most American families had only one car, one TV, and one bathroom, and somehow that was enough. Financial sufficiency in the 50s didn't come from massive incomes, but from reasonable living costs and post-war economic stability. Gas was 29 cents. In 1955, a gallon of gas cost only 29 cents. This created incredible freedom for drivers. $5 was enough to fill the tank right to the brim. You didn't have to worry about how fast the meter was spinning as the pump tallied the cost. And after filling up, you still had enough change left over for a cold bottle of Coke and a pack of gum. Low fuel costs made long road trips easy, encouraging a driving culture on roads that were not yet the interstate highway system. Gas station service. Back then, pumping gas was a service experience. You didn't pump your own gas. When you drove into the station, a cheerful, usually neatly uniformed young attendant would step out to serve you. He didn't just fill the tank. He would clean your windshield spotlessly and call you sir, as a matter of course. It was a dedicated, customer-focused service, and part of a courteous culture where people were willing to help each other without expecting anything extra. Neighborhood shopping. If your mom needed bread in the 1950s, she wouldn't touch an app to order online. Instead, she would send you to the small local grocery store nearby. You'd hand the clerk $1 and you'd leave with a fresh loaf of bread, some fresh milk, and change jingling in your pocket. You felt like you had completed an important and responsible task. The local store. Small local grocery stores were the heart of the neighborhood. They weren't enormous supermarkets, but gathering places where everyone knew each other's names. The staff didn't just know your name. They knew your parents, your siblings, and might ask about your family vacation. You didn't get lost in endless aisles of a massive supermarket. It was a deep community experience where staff knew your favorite items and inquired about your family, reinforcing a sense of familiarity and security in town. Chevy Bel Air. The 1955 Chevy Bel Air grabbed attention on every street, becoming an unmistakable icon of the decade. With its magnificent two-tone paint, shiny chrome accents, and roaring V8 engine, this car looked like it was flying even when standing still. Owning a Chevy Bel Air was a sign of success, a badge you wore with pride. It clearly demonstrated the difference between a modern Chevy focused on performance and a classic Chevy focused on style and symbolism. Movie ticket was 48 cents. In 1950, a movie ticket cost only 48 cents. For less than $1, you could have a comfortable seat, a box of popcorn, and maybe a fun cartoon before the main feature. No need for reservations, no endless trailers, you just showed up. Whatever film you chose, the experience was almost always worthwhile. TV dinner. The TV dinner debuted in 1953, bringing a whole new definition of convenience to the kitchen. It came in a shiny foil tray and cost 98 cents. Crucially, it promised a complete meal without having to wash any dishes. American families loved this convenience after a long day of work. Back then, no one called it processed food. Hey, it was simply convenient and provided a bit of fun eating off your own tray, often while watching the newly acquired black and white TV. Jello Mold. There was always the infamous Jello Mold at parties and Sunday dinners, especially at large family gatherings. This wobbly dessert was made from gelatin, often mixed with cottage cheese, canned fruit, or sometimes shredded carrots to create a unique texture and color. Hardly anyone actually liked the Jello Mold, but everyone still took a spoonful out of tradition. The issue wasn't the flavor, it was the ritual of gathering, the presence of everyone, and adhering to family tradition. New channel, old memories, help us share more by hyping this video. Every hype makes a huge difference. The doctor made house calls. If you were sick in the 50s, you wouldn't look up symptoms online or text your doctor. You called the family physician. He would arrive at your house with his familiar black bag, a thermometer, and a calm voice. He would examine you right there in the living room. This memory evokes a level of personal care and trust that is rare today, making you feel better instantly just by his presence. No locked doors. In the 50s, you didn't bother locking the door. Not because crime didn't exist, but because trust still existed in the community. If someone knocked, you welcomed them in. If they didn't knock, it was probably a cousin returning the ladder they borrowed last week. When you went away, house keys were often given to the neighbor to feed the cat. No alarm systems or surveillance cameras were needed, just trust between people and perhaps a fresh pie waiting for you on the kitchen table when you got home. This trust was the foundation of social life back then. Adjusting the antenna. In the early 1950s, television antennas started sprouting up on rooftops across the country. Families would send someone, usually the father or eldest son, up onto the roof or garage, equipped with a wrench and a bit of hope, trying to adjust the antenna just right. One wrong turn and the image turned back into static, but if done correctly, you would have a crystal clear, "I love Lucy." Mr. Potato Head? In 1952, Mr. Potato Head became the first toy ever advertised on TV. The forgotten part of this memory is, back then, you didn't buy a complete plastic set. You had to supply a real potato yourself to stick the plastic parts, eyes, nose, ears, onto it. The entirely plastic version came much later. This memory emphasizes the simplicity and creativity of toys back then. Try giving a raw potato to a child today and telling them, "Here, have fun playing." Inexpensive trucks. A brand new Ford F-100 in the early 1950s cost less than $1,500. This was a durable vehicle built for work. It had no touchscreens, no Bluetooth, no complex driver assistance features. Just solid steel, a crackling AM radio, and a bench seat wide enough for 3 grown men and a dog. If something broke, you fixed it yourself. That was a respected skill, and the initial cost of the vehicle was truly affordable. Car interiors. Car interiors were made of steel and vinyl, not designed for modern comfort. There were no cup holders, no airbags, and no electronics whatsoever besides the radio. If you left the car in the summer sun, the steering wheel was hot enough to fry an egg on. Everything was designed to be durable, easy to clean, and easy to fix, rather than for maximum comfort or safety. Car locks were optional. Car keys were genuinely optional in the 50s. Some trucks didn't even have door locks. You parked the car, slipped the key under the sun visor, and no one touched it. Today, you need a password to start the microwave, but back then, trust was stronger than technology. That is a clear illustration of the societal shift and the required level of security. Small screen TVS. In 1950, most TVs had screens no bigger than a dinner plate. They weighed as much as a small refrigerator and had low resolution, typically only displaying black and white. Despite their modest size, the TV was the center of family entertainment. drawing everyone to gather in the living room. The TV was furniture. The TV wasn't placed on a shelf, it was the piece of furniture. They were heavy wooden cabinets with legs and a fabric front concealing the speakers. When it broke, your dad didn't throw it away but called a repairman who usually showed up with his toolbox and a cigarette. This is a huge difference compared to today's flat-screen TVs, which are lightweight, convenient, and easily replaceable devices. No remote. There were no remote controls or pause buttons in the early days of TV. If you wanted to change the channel using a rotary dial, you had to get up to do it. And typically, your father would make you do it, not as a choice, but as part of growing up and learning obedience, especially if you were sitting closest to the TV. Were you the one who was forced to get up and change the TV channel? What childhood memory do you recall most vividly? Let us know by sharing. Radio flyer wagon. Every kid wanted the shiny red radio flyer wagon. It was used to haul everything from toys, pets, groceries, to even your siblings. When it rained, you flipped it over and it turned into a pirate ship, a secret fortress, or a turtle shell for shelter. The only upgrade you needed was imagination, an endless resource. No helmets. Kids rode bikes without helmets. No elbow pads or foam padding, just scraped knees and streamers on the handlebars. If you fell, you limped home and mom would dab iodine on the wound as if it were miracle water. And somehow you survived, stronger, and learned lessons about caution and resilience. Bar soap bathrooms. Bar soap was the default item in every bathroom. Brands like Irish Spring, Lifebuoy, and Dial were commonly used. Every bathroom had a washcloth and a drawer full of pink and green soap slivers that had melted and stuck together like glue, waiting to be used up. Disneyland. Disneyland opened in California in 1955. Walt Disney himself walked around the park on opening day. It only had 18 rides, but was still dubbed the happiest place on Earth. Despite a plumber strike and the asphalt melting under the heat, it was still a historic event, a symbol of American optimism. Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner was a non-negotiable ritual. The whole family gathered, including grandparents, cousins, and the noisy uncle who always told the same story every week. The traditional menu included roast beef, mashed potatoes, and the infamous Jello Mold. The issue wasn't the meal, but the moments of gathering, the presence of family. New baby help. When a neighbor had a baby, the whole street would bring food, casseroles, and hand-me-down cribs. There were no online gift registries or fanfare, just neighbors and friends helping each other out. New fathers were expected to hand out cigars to friends and colleagues to celebrate. Strict bank hours. Bank hours were very strict. If you didn't get there before 3 p.m. on Friday, you wouldn't have cash until Monday. There were no ATMs or banking apps. You only had a teller behind a glass window and the sound of the stamp confirming your deposit. No gym needed. You didn't need a gym membership in the 1950s. Daily chores kept you fit. That meant mowing the lawn with a push mower, chopping wood for the stove, hanging clothes outside on the clothesline. That was your workout. And somehow, your grandpa's calves were still better than yours are now. The 50th state. In 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. For many Americans, it felt like another world. Beaches, volcanoes, hula skirts. Postcards from paradise started appearing in mailboxes everywhere. Sunday morning, the radio played gospel music and the news. Dad read the paper, Mom poured the coffee, and the world felt slow in the best way possible. Hats were mandatory. Men wore hats, fedora, pork pie, flat cap when leaving the house. It was simply what you did, part of daily preparation and a sign of respect. The hat wasn't just an accessory, it was part of the social uniform. Hat respect. Men tipped their hats when greeting someone, even if it was just a fleeting gesture on the street. And they removed their hats upon entering a home without thinking. That was part of the courtesy that has been forgotten today, a silent language of respectful communication. If you could relive any day in this 50s decade, which one would you choose? Share your most precious memory in the comments below. Rotary dial phone. Telephone communication in the 50s was a process that required patience and focus. Phones were rotary dial, often hard-mounted to the wall in the kitchen or hallway with a coiled cord. To make a call, you had to dial each digit carefully. If you unfortunately dialed the last number wrong, you had to start dialing the entire phone number all over again. Most families only had one phone and one number, and if it rang, everyone ran to pick it up because there was no voicemail. Travel without seatbelts. During long trips in the station wagon, the most common sight was the entire family piled into the car without seatbelts. Children were free to move around, the windows were rolled down, and the family dog drooled into the wind. This was an era where safety was not prioritized as it is now. Mom was often busy passing sandwiches forward from the cooler to the front seats. Although less safe by modern standards, these trips are still remembered as moments of freedom and cheerful family chaos in the spacious station wagon interior. The highway system. The road transport system in the 1950s. America was significantly different from today. The vast interstate highway system we know now did not yet exist. It wasn't until 1956 that President Eisenhower signed the act establishing the system. Prior to that, long road trips were a real roll of the dice. Travelers had to rely on old state and national highways. The absence of a unified highway system made road travel an experience requiring a great deal of patience, forcing people to prepare thoroughly for any possible breakdown. Paper maps. Road travel in the 50s required meticulous preparation and a sense of adventure. Since there was no modern GPS system, travelers had to rely entirely on large paper maps, often provided by oil companies. If you got lost, you had to stop and ask a local for directions. It's memorable that these strangers were usually genuinely kind and helpful. Sometimes they drew detailed instructions with a pencil on the back of a napkin or scrap paper. This trust was very high, and people believed strangers wouldn't send them the wrong way just for a joke. Furthermore, you always needed to carry a spare tire and tools to change it, as service stations could be far apart. Desks with inkwells. Even though education was advancing into the modern era, school desks in classrooms still had small inkwells. These little holes were relics from the past, remaining even as students had switched to using modern ballpoint pens. Kids would often poke pencils through these holes, wondering how people used to write with a quill pen back in the day. Formal air travel. Air travel in the 1950s was a rare and extremely formal event. It wasn't just transportation, it was a special occasion. Men wore suits and ties while women wore gloves and hats. Passengers were treated like honored guests. They were served real meals with silverware and had plenty of legroom. Flight attendants always had warm smiles. Absolutely no one wore athletic clothes or pajamas on the plane, and certainly no one tried to bring strange pets into the cabin. Toolbox. For the man of the house. In the 1950s, the heavy steel toolbox wasn't just a place to store tools. It was a symbol of pride and self-reliance. The box often lacked flashy labels, but was full of grease stains, dents, and scratches accumulated over years of use. This heavy box contained the know-how and the ability to fix everything oneself, from a broken toaster to a lawnmower. It demonstrated the man's self-sufficiency and was physical proof of the spirit of not throwing things away. What self-repair skill did you learn from your father or grandfather? Share that lesson and the item you were proudest to have successfully fixed. Fear of polio. One of the greatest fears of the 1950s was polio. This was a terrible and persistent disease that caused anxiety for families. During severe outbreaks, children were often asked to stay away from public swimming pools and movie theaters to prevent the spread of the virus. Summer was not just a time for fun, but also a season of constant worry, as parents watched their children with great caution. Open heart surgery. One of the biggest breakthroughs was the first successful open-heart surgery using a heart-lung machine, which took place in 1953. This sounded like a science fiction scenario, stopping the patient's heart, fixing it, and starting it again. But it succeeded, and this achievement redefined what doctors believed they could do in surgery. It launched a new era for modern cardiac surgery. DNA structure. A revolutionary scientific discovery, laying the foundation for modern biology, occurred in 1953 when James Watson and Francis Crick revealed the double helix structure of DNA. At the time, most of the public had no idea what this finding meant. For many, it was just a strange diagram in a scientific journal. However, understanding the shape and mechanism of this genetic material paved the way for science, medicine, and even criminal investigation. Although quiet, this discovery had a long-lasting impact on the entire scientific world. Nuclear power plant. The 1950s also marked an energy transition. The first nuclear power plant was switched on in Idaho in 1951. While historic, the initial output was extremely modest. It only generated enough power to light 4 light bulbs. However, for Americans, this was the spark that started something great. There was widespread belief that the future belonged to atomic energy, bringing a feeling both thrilling and slightly fearful about this enormous potential. The microchip. A quiet invention, late in the decade laid the foundation for the digital age. The microchip was invented in 1958. At the time, nobody outside the lab cared much about this tiny object. People were even more impressed by automatic garage doors than by microchips. However, it was this invention that laid the groundwork for the development of computers, mobile phones, and almost every technology we use today. It was an understated historical event at the time, but its impact is unparalleled. Sputnik. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. Although it was only the size of a beach ball, the event sent shockwaves across America. Sputnik immediately accelerated the space race. This event made Americans concerned about falling behind technologically, and as a result, from then on, the word science became a much more important word in every American classroom, driving huge investments in education and research. Writing with typewriters. Before digital keyboards, office work and studying were tied to the typewriter, creating the characteristic clacking sound that echoed through offices and classrooms. When mistakes were made, correction was complicated. You had to use white correction fluid, or worse, start typing the entire document over again from scratch. There was no delete button or autocorrect. However, the most satisfying thing was the distinctive sound when you hit the return key. A sharp ding and the smooth slide of the carriage, signaling you were ready to start a new line. No air conditioning. The summer experience in the 1950s was very different, as most American homes did not have central air conditioning. To combat the heat, people relied on traditional and simple measures. They cooled down by running large box fans, enjoying a tall, cool glass of lemonade, or sometimes they would sleep out on the porch or in the cool basement on the hottest nights. The important thing is that hardly anyone complained. It was simply part of summer. Fathers often said the heat helped build character, and people believed it. Eating on the hood. Because fast food places like McDonald's and drive-in diners back then often didn't have much comfortable indoor seating, people created their own dining ritual. They often ate burgers and fries right on the hood of their car. That was part of car culture, enjoying a meal under bright neon lights in the night sky. The feeling of standing next to your Bel Air, enjoying a 15-cent burger and 10-cent fries, was described as perfect, a combination of fast food and personal freedom. Glass bottle milk. Home delivery service was an integral part of life. Milk did not come in paper cartons. It arrived at your house in thick glass bottles. The milkman would place these cold bottles right on your doorstep before sunrise. You would hear the gentle clinking of the glass, the official sign that a new day was beginning. If you were lucky, your mom would let you peel off the little paper cap on the bottle before breakfast. These milk bottles would then be returned for reuse, reflecting a naturally sustainable consumption model. Ice Cream Man. The sound of the ice cream truck driving by on the street was a magical sound for kids in the 50s. Upon hearing the bell, children would run barefoot on the sidewalk, clutching their coins, screaming for favorite treats like bomb pops and drumsticks. At that time, no one worried about sugar or calories. It was all about the feeling of that first bite under the sun, with sticky fingers for the rest of the afternoon. Canned food is king. In the 1950s kitchen, canned food was considered king. Items like Spam, Campbell's condensed soups, and canned fruit cocktail often featuring a lonely cherry were staples. Due to persistent Cold War anxiety, families often stockpiled their pantries. Cupboards were filled as if they were mini bomb shelters against fallout. Canned food represented convenience and preparation for uncertainties, ensuring the family always had enough to eat. Soda shop. Every town had a soda fountain or small lunch counter that served as the social hub. This was where teenagers met after school or on weekends. You would sit on the red, swivel stools, order a cool cherry Coke or a grilled cheese sandwich. The waitress would call out your name when the food was ready because she practically knew you since childhood. The soda fountain wasn't just a place to eat. It was a spot for forming community relationships and a romantic dating location filled with music from the jukebox. Natural food. The concept of organic food as we understand it complexly today actually did not exist. Most basic products like milk, butter, and meat were supplied by nearby farms. Consumers didn't need to ask if the food was naturally grown because it simply was. Fresh, local food was the default standard, not a luxury or specialty item. This reflected a simpler food supply chain, closer to natural sources, where small grocery stores were the connection point to the farm. The Diner Club. 1950 saw the birth of the first modern credit card, called the Diner Club. Initially, Diner Club was designed specifically for businessmen so they could pay for meals and entertainment expenses without carrying cash. It was a crucial step, ushering in a new financial era. By the late 50s, more people were signing up to use the card, although many were thought to have forgotten to read the fine print, signaling the beginning of the credit-based society. Elvis Presley. Youth culture changed forever when Elvis Presley released his first single, That's All Right, in 1954. His arrival caused rock and roll to explode. Teenagers felt infused with a pure rush of energy, where every hip shake by Elvis seemed to be rewriting social rules. Conversely, some adults found his moves too provocative, lacking in respect. Parents panicked and preachers warned against this new music, but teenagers simply turned the music up louder. Brownie camera. The Kodak Brownie camera made photography more accessible and affordable for the average person. Precious family moments like birthdays, beach trips, and BBQs could now be captured. These photos were often black and white and grainy. Since the cameras were rudimentary, taking photos was a skill. It was often joked that if your finger wasn't in the frame, it was a good picture. Every photograph was a cherished souvenir, kept like a treasure. Dick Clark. The show American Bandstand became nationally famous in 1957, hosted by the clean-cut Dick Clark. This was where American teenagers could watch and learn the latest dances. They danced in trendy outfits, including saddle shoes and wide poodle skirts. The show wasn't just a TV show, it shaped what was considered cool across the country. While the teenagers were dancing, parents often stood frowning, watching from the kitchen doorway. Hula hoop. The late 1950s saw a massive toy craze called the hula hoop. This simple toy debuted in 1958, and within just 4 months, 25 million units were sold. Kids spun the hula hoop in their yards, schoolyards, and parks until they felt dizzy. Neighborhood contests even sprang up overnight. The funny thing is that parents secretly tried playing too after dark, although the result was often strained muscles trying to keep up with their children. Pastel bathrooms. Architecturally, most American families in the 1950s had only one bathroom to serve the whole family. This bathroom often featured the decade's characteristic colors: pastel pink, mint green, or light blue. The unusual feature was that the toilet, bathtub, and wall tiles were often designed to match in color. The simplicity of having only one bathroom forced members to learn to share, and the soft colors provided a clean, fresh feel. Shared bath water. With most families having only one bathroom, bathing multiple children was a tightly organized operation. If a family had 3 kids, this was called a military operation. The oldest child would bathe first, followed by the middle one, and the youngest child would bathe last. This meant they often had to share the same bath water. This is a clear example of thriftiness and practicality in family life, where sharing and resourcefulness were daily necessities. The beauty parlor. The beauty parlor was an important social center where daily gossip was spread. The signature scent of the salon was a blend of hairspray, perm solution, and various other chemicals. While their hair was in rollers and drying, women had time to chat and exchange information about their neighbors' lives. It was a private and essential space for social connection outside the family, reinforcing the bonds among women. Drying hair. Hairstyling in the 1950s was a lengthy process requiring patience. Women would set their hair with metal rollers. Then, they would sit under a giant helmet-shaped hairdryer. These dryers looked as if they stepped right out of a science fiction movie. This drying process forced them to sit still for a long time, giving them the chance to read magazines or participate in the gossip-fueled conversations within the beauty parlor. Growing up in the 1960s, 50 things you'll never forget. Some things were an indispensable part of life in the 1960s, but today they have become a mystery to the younger generation. Just imagine a world without smartphones, without the internet, without remote controls, where every joy and habit was very different. Today, we will take you on a journey to discover unique experiences that only those who lived in this decade truly understand. Ready? These memories will surely make you both surprised and nostalgic. Winding your watch daily. Few modern devices offer the special feeling that this watch did. Imagine waking up every morning, picking up your wristwatch and winding it. This was a daily ritual for most people wearing watches in the 1960s because battery-powered watches were still quite new and not widely popular. The gentle click-clack sound of the winding mechanism was the sound signaling the start of a new day. In an era of simple technology, it was a physical interaction with a personal item, far different from just looking at a phone screen or smartwatch today. Pogo sticks hop rod? In the 60s, pogo sticks were everywhere, especially the hop rod, advertised as the first powered pogo stick. Yes, a newly designed gasoline-powered pogo stick. Children spent hours trying to balance and bounce on the sidewalk, swaying until they found their rhythm or fell down with laughter. It wasn't as easy as it looked. With just a metal frame, a spring, and a few footrests, it took real skill to keep going. The click-clack of the spring, the fleeting feeling of weightlessness, that was pure magic. And if you could bounce all the way home without stopping, that was something to brag about. A scraped knee here and there was just part of the experience. No one worried too much about it back then. Ant farms. Ant farms were a popular way for children to get close to nature. You would sit for hours watching the ants build tunnels, carry food, and work together like a small army. Kids were incredibly excited to observe them and watch daily to see the ant colony grow. You would tap on the glass to try to make them move or wonder how they knew their way. It was one of those simple yet captivating ways to learn about life, teamwork, and patience. And honestly, having a small ant colony living right in your room was pretty cool. Fizzies, carbonated drink tablets. Fizzies were the 60s version of instant fun. These small tablets could turn a glass of water into a carbonated, bubbly drink in seconds. You just dropped a tablet into a glass of water, watched it fizz, and then enjoyed a sweet, fizzy drink without needing to open a soda can. It wasn't just about the flavor, but the whole process that made it exciting. With so many flavors to choose from, fizzies became a favorite way to cool off in the summer or make any occasion a little more special. For many kids, it was like making their own soda right in their kitchen. Shared party line telephones with neighbors. Before private phone lines existed, having a phone line was a big deal. Many families shared lines with neighbors, which meant you could pick up the phone and accidentally overhear someone else's conversation, whether you wanted to or not. And honestly, sometimes we had a little fun with that. But once you got your own private line, it was truly a game changer. No more waiting for others to finish talking or worrying about interruptions. The phone became your private space, perfect for chatting with friends. Burns, scratches, and scars were considered badges of honor. As mentioned, children of the 1960s were raised differently. They didn't mind small burns, scratches, or scars on their bodies. On the contrary, these marks were considered badges of honor. They were proof of adventures, daring games, and lessons learned from real life. A scar on the knee might be a memory of falling off a bicycle, while a small burn could come from playing with dangerous toys. It was a life attitude that today's generation might find hard to understand, as safety and child protection are paramount. Having to wait for rotating films at local movie theaters. The movie-watching experience in the 1960s was very different from today. There was no instant access to popular films, and we had to wait patiently. That's because downtown movie theaters usually only had 1 or 2 screens. Movies would rotate weekly or bi-weekly. For most of us, there were no multiplexes to show every new release. Large shopping malls were also just beginning to emerge. This created a special sense of anticipation and excitement when a new movie came out, as it was the only chance to see it for a certain period. This experience is completely different from instantly accessing any movie on online platforms today. Banana seat bikes. The 60s marked the advent of a childhood icon, the banana seat bike. With its long, curved seat and colorful design, these bikes made you feel like you were cruising in style. The most popular was the Schwinn Stingray, with high handlebars that looked like a chopper motorcycle, instantly making it the coolest bike on the street. Every kid wanted this bike on their wish list. Whether you were showing off your new bike or gathering with friends to race around the neighborhood, these bicycles were an important part of childhood. They were designed for comfort with their special, distinctive seat, and often vibrant colors made them a true symbol of the 60s. Among the things we've just mentioned, what do you remember most about your 60s childhood? Or what surprised you the most? Please leave a comment below. The popularity of Silly Putty. Do you still remember the joy of peeling open the red egg containing Silly Putty? You could bounce it, stretch it, and most fascinatingly, use it on newspaper to create an exact copy of your favorite comic strip. That moment was truly priceless. Silly Putty is still sold today, but very few families still keep printed newspapers at home, and children today certainly no longer read comic strips in newspapers. Therefore, the popularity of Silly Putty is no longer what it once was, when it was a symbol of creativity and entertainment tied to newspaper reading culture. The decline of printed newspapers in many households has changed how children interact with these simple toys. Analog clock reading skills were essential. Along with winding, the ability to read an analog clock was absolutely essential. Wall clocks and wristwatches usually only displayed hands and markings or Roman numerals. There were no easy-to-read digital displays or convenient digital notifications. Understanding the position of the hour and minute hands, how they moved, and what time they indicated was a basic skill every child had to learn early on. Today, you might be surprised to learn that there's an entire generation of children who can't read an analog clock because they've never needed to. The proliferation of digital devices has led to the loss of a skill that was once fundamental to daily life. Pregnant women still smoked and drank alcohol. Looking back at the 1960s, one thing that might astonish today's generation is the lifestyle of pregnant women. While we are now very cautious during pregnancy, abstaining from caffeine and deli meats, taking full vitamin supplements, and avoiding anything that could harm the baby, mothers in the 60s didn't change many of their habits after becoming pregnant. If a woman smoked before pregnancy, she was likely to continue smoking. Similarly, if she drank alcohol, that habit often persisted. Of course, these mothers had no intention of harming their children, because the dangers of these habits were not fully understood at the time. It's interesting to look back at photo albums and see images of pregnant mothers with a cigarette in hand as a normal part of life back then. Cigarettes were even heavily advertised in magazines with glamorous actors and catchy slogans forming a part of the social culture. Walking to school alone and carrying books by hand. In the 1960s, the most common way to get to school every morning was to walk. There was no concept of school buses or long lines waiting for parents to drop off and pick up children, as there is today. Even at just 6 years old, children were sent to school alone and taught how to find their way. Sometimes they might go with siblings or a neighborhood child, following the same route, but not always. Parents had no hesitation in preparing lunch and letting their children go to school by themselves. Furthermore, backpacks didn't become common until the 1970s. So children had to carry their textbooks, notebooks and papers by hand, or tucked under their arms when walking to school. It was a significant burden to juggle everything in sweaty hands, without the luxury of a bag that could be slung over the shoulder. The image of independent children making their own way to school was very familiar in this era. Collecting green and blue chip stamps. In those days, shopping came with a special reward. Green and blue chip stamps were given when you spent a certain amount at the store. We would collect them in small booklets, and when we had enough, we could redeem them for all sorts of items, from kitchenware to toys. It was like a little treasure hunt. Every trip to the store brought us closer to a new item, and we loved flipping through the catalogs to pick out what we would get. For many families, those stamps were a fun little bonus every time we shopped. Metal can openers, church keys. Opening a soda can meant using a metal can opener. These openers had a sharp pointed end on one side and a flat edge on the other, about 4 to 5 inches long. They were often given away by soda and beer companies with their logos etched into the metal. Back then, it wasn't as simple as pulling a pop-top tab. You had to twist the opener into the can and pry it open. It might take a little effort, but the first sip after putting in the work tasted even sweeter. This was a small, everyday life skill that today's generation doesn't need to know. Smoking was common everywhere, and for everyone. In the 60s, smoking was as common as drinking coffee. You could light up almost anywhere, on planes, in restaurants, and even in hospitals. It wasn't just about cigarettes, it was a part of the culture. Advertisements with glamorous actors and catchy slogans flooded magazines, and cigarette brands almost became part of a person's identity. Smoking was so prevalent that even pregnant women were regularly seen lighting up, despite the health risks we know today. Whether you were relaxing with friends or taking a break at work, cigarettes were everywhere, and for many, it seemed they always would be. Huge ashtrays filled with cigarette butts were a familiar sight in every room of every home. The console TV was the center of the living room. The television was the center of every living room, and in the 60s it wasn't just any TV, it was a console TV. These bulky TVs with wooden frames often took up an entire wall and were designed as stylish furniture as well as technology. Sound came from large built-in speakers, and you had to adjust the rabbit ears to get the best picture. There was no remote control, so you were the remote, having to get up to change channels or adjust the volume. But even with those extra efforts, it was a magical time to watch TV, with the whole family gathering together to watch the latest episode of their favorite show. Do you remember the first color TV show you ever watched? The Jetsons on ABC? Although it only lasted 24 episodes, it made children wonder what the future would be like. Going to the drive-in theater. Nothing captures the essence of a night out quite like a trip to the drive-in theater. You would drive up to a giant outdoor screen, park, and tune your car radio to hear the movie. It wasn't just about the film, but the whole experience. Families would load up their cars with blankets and snacks, while groups of friends or couples enjoyed the chance to relax in the back seat. And if you were lucky, you'd get to watch 2 movies in a row, extending the fun under the stars. The drive-in wasn't just a movie, it was an event. A place where the magic of cinema came alive in the open air. What a great way to combine entertainment with the private space of the family car. Soda fountains. Soda fountains were wonderful places to get a cool drink and have fun moments. These classic counters were always lively, serving everything from cold sodas to thick milkshakes. People would gather with friends, chat, and enjoy a refreshing treat on a hot afternoon. The soda jerk behind the counter would skillfully and quickly mix your favorite drink, and there was something special about the atmosphere there. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversations, and classic tunes from the jukebox. It was a place where life's simple pleasures were shared, and every visit felt like a small celebration. World Book Encyclopedia Set. Before Google existed, the World Book Encyclopedia Set was our main source of knowledge to explore the world. As children, we loved flipping through the colorful pages, whether for school assignments or simply to look up something that sparked our curiosity. These books were filled with fascinating facts about everything, from outer space to ancient history. We would gather around, eagerly searching for answers or sharing an interesting piece of information we found. For many families, owning a complete encyclopedia set was a big deal, like having the whole world at your fingertips. Paper maps were essential travel companions. Before the era of GPS, if you wanted to go somewhere, you had to rely on these trustworthy paper maps to guide you. Whether it was a weekend road trip or a cross-country adventure, spreading out the map and planning the route was part of the fun. We would spread them out on the car hood or the kitchen table, tracing our journey with our fingers and marking towns along the way. There was no zoom function or automatic rerouting, just a large, detailed map showing the world one road at a time. I still keep a few maps in my car's glove compartment, and with them, I never have to worry about losing signal or having no internet. The national anthem playing when TV stations signed off. In the 60s, the national anthem was played when television stations signed off for the night. After hours of broadcasting, the screen would slowly fade to black, and the national anthem would echo through the room. It was a solemn moment marking the end of the day. Everyone would stop what they were doing, perhaps to reflect for a moment, as the image of the stars and stripes, the American flag, appeared on screen. For many, it was a familiar routine, bringing a sense of comfort before static took over the airwaves until morning. Easy Bake Oven Toy. For those who couldn't wait to grow up and be responsible for cooking their own meals, there was the Easy Bake Oven. Kenner released this iconic toy in 1963, which came with recipes for baking cookies, cakes, and other treats themselves. This toy oven was not just a toy, but also a tool that helped children learn basic cooking and baking skills, stimulating creativity and independence. Being able to freely and safely explore the culinary world right in their own kitchen made this item a legendary object that everyone knew. The debut of the Beatles and Beatlemania. If you were a kid in 1964 and your parents owned a TV, you surely witnessed the Beatles' American debut on The Ed Sullivan Show. Their appearance created a wild craze, and this reaction became known as Beatlemania. Their mop-top haircuts inspired children to get similar haircuts or buy Beatles-like wigs. Their ankle-high boots also became fashionable, followed by collarless jackets, inspiring many to wear them. The Beatles were a cultural phenomenon that changed fashion, music, and even the attitudes of a generation. American Bandstand and trendy dances. Hosted by Dick Clark, American Bandstand was a must-watch TV show for every child growing up in the 1960s. The show not only helped us discover new artists like Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Sonny and Cher, and Tina Turner, but also taught us trendy dances like the locomotion, the Watusi, and the mashed potato. American Bandstand was a window into the world of music and youth culture, where dances spread and new trends were formed. You could learn to express yourself through music and movement, becoming part of a growing cultural movement. Buying candy or drinks at the store with loose change. One of the best things about walking home from school was being able to stop by a small store to buy candy. Back then, with just a little loose change, you could buy a big bag of candy. You could linger, order an ice cream soda, a malt, or an egg cream, and sit leaning against the counter enjoying it like a real adult. The feeling of sitting at a classic bar where people gathered, chatted, and enjoyed refreshments, with the clinking of glasses and music from the jukebox, was an unforgettable part of childhood. Simple but meaningful moments that any child would be excited about. Have you ever experienced this? Please share in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Learning to earn, count, and spend real money early on. From a very young age, children learned how to earn money, count money, and spend real money. Going to the store alone, handing over loose change, and receiving change back was not just a simple transaction, but also a practical lesson about the value of money and financial management. This is very different from today's younger generation, who often tend to think that plastic cards, credit cards, are the only way to pay for everything. The skill of using cash, feeling the weight of coins in your hand, and carefully calculating to buy your favorite item was an important part of growing up for children in the 1960s. High-risk toys were accepted. Science experiment kits that could emit toxic fumes to plastic melting ovens like the Thing Maker. Children learned early on that life had dangers and that they needed to be careful when using certain toys. BB guns, for example, were considered a common toy, and almost every child wanted one. Unlike today, when toys with choking hazards are recalled from shelves, children of the 60s were built differently. They weren't afraid of burns, scratches, or scars. In fact, these were even seen as badges of honor. Other toys were also challenging and sometimes dangerous in their own ways. Rock'em Sock'em Robots was a classic toy that children across the country loved, trying to make the robots' heads pop off. Major Matt Mason, a Mattel action figure, could bend, but its wire frame often broke at the knees or elbows over time. Wham-O Super Balls was another unique toy that children loved to bounce as high as possible, followed by a race to chase them. The Creepy Crawler's rubber insect maker was also a fun activity, where you poured liquid into molds and baked them in a small oven at 350 degrees to create your own rubber creatures. Photo slides and slide projectors. Photo slides and slide projectors were the best way to revisit and share special moments. After a vacation or a family gathering, the living room would be filled with excitement as the projector clicked, one slide after another, bringing your memories to the wall. It wasn't just about looking at pictures, but about the whole family gathering, turning off the lights and reminiscing. Sure, sometimes you had to endure a long, drawn-out slideshow, but there was something magical about seeing those moments unfold before your eyes, one slide at a time. It was a family ritual, a way to connect with the past and share joy with loved ones. The magical feeling of the 1969 moon landing. The moon landing in 1969 was one of those moments you'll never forget. That feeling of extreme exhilaration when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, and we all thought, wow, we're actually doing this. It was as if the impossible had become reality. Even if you couldn't understand every detail, you still knew something big was happening. That small step for one man seemed like a giant leap for all mankind. We all wanted to grow up and become astronauts. We watched all the rocket launches, landings, and returns on our school TVs. The dream of becoming an astronaut was common, fostering an interest in science and exploration. Zebra stripe gum. If you were a kid in the 60s, zebra stripe gum was a must-have. With its colorful striped wrapper, it stood out from all other gums. The flavor didn't last long, but that didn't stop us. We'd chew a piece, blow bubbles, and enjoy every bit of it while the flavor lasted. It wasn't about the long-lasting flavor, but about the joy. Sharing a piece with friends and the bold, eye-catching wrapper made it unique. A&W drive-up restaurants. A&W drive-up restaurants were truly unique. You'd park your car, and in a moment, a car hop would roller skate to your vehicle, bringing your meal on a tray, often a root beer float or a burger. The roller skates just made everything more fun. It wasn't just about ordering a meal, but the whole experience, from watching the car hops glide around to enjoying the food with friends or family. TV dinner was a breakthrough. With television programming still quite new in the 1960s, the idea of watching TV while eating dinner was a breakthrough by the Swanson Company. The first TV dinner was packaged in a compartmentalized foil tray that you could heat in the oven. They quickly became a staple in family freezers across the country. Their novelty made Swanson TV dinners extremely popular, and other companies also began offering their own versions. This idea was particularly favored by working mothers and quickly became a staple of middle-class American families. The compartmentalized tray even had a separate section for dessert, often a fruit cobbler or brownie, which was usually scalding hot compared to the main dish. Jello was a complete and surprising meal. Speaking of food, the 60s brought some dishes that might make many young people today cringe. Jello is just a dessert today, but back then, it could be an entire meal. Our mothers experimented with putting everything into Jello, and truly, everything. If you find a cookbook from the 1960s, you can be sure it will have a recipe for molded gelatin containing ham, vegetables, or fish. Jello even introduced savory flavors like celery, mixed vegetables, and Italian salad. Imagine a child sitting in front of a wobbly gelatin plate with hidden pieces of meat inside. If you had a mother who made you finish your dinner before leaving the table, you might have been sitting there for quite a while if the meal included this special Jello dish. Western movies were everything to a boy. If you grew up in the 1960s, Western movies were everything to a boy. John Wayne was the star in movies. Shows like Gunsmoke and Bonanza were what you watched on TV. Bonanza was also the first Western to be broadcast in color, so it was exciting to find someone in the neighborhood who had a color TV to watch it. If you weren't watching Bonanza, you'd be outdoors with your cowboy hat or coonskin hat and a cap gun strapped to your side. I'm not sure when I last saw a child playing outside with a cap gun, but in the 1960s, all of us did. These toy guns made a pop sound and even produced smoke when fired, adding realism to any outdoor shootout. First job with a salary of $1 to $1.50 per hour. Getting your first job in the 1960s meant you were paid a pretty substantial wage from $1 to $1.50 per hour. This was still a big achievement and meant you could earn a significant amount of pocket money, more than the loose change collected from returning cans and bottles. For teenagers at that time, a minimum wage job was not just about earning money, but also taught them how to be a good employee. That started with wearing a clean and ironed uniform, being on time, and working hard. The last time I went to McDonald's, the sign listed a starting salary of $15 per hour, but the employees were in casual clothes and I had to wait 20 minutes to get the wrong order. How much things have changed. Playing outside all day in the summer. The 60s was a time of typical childhood moments like playing outside all day during summer. There were no smartphones, no video games, or internet to keep children indoors. Summer was a time for exploration, adventure, and creativity. Children would go out early in the morning and return when the streetlights came on, with dirty feet and muddy clothes. Games like baseball, tag, or simply wandering and exploring the neighborhood shaped the childhood of a generation. Backyards, parks, and streets became vast playgrounds where imagination soared. Family road trips in station wagons without seatbelts. The 60s saw family road trips in station wagons become an icon. Back then, there were no seatbelt laws, so you could sprawl out in the back seat to color, read, or just relax during long drives. This created a sense of freedom and space that children today cannot imagine in a fully safety-equipped car. Station wagons were the common car for every middle-class family. It was part of the family adventure, with the whole family piling into the car to go to the drive-in theater or for summer travel. The feeling of lying on your back looking up at the car ceiling or squeezing in with siblings on long trips is an unforgettable memory. Tang, the must-have astronaut drink. Do you remember drinking Tang? The orange powder was poured into water, where it magically turned into a super sweet neon orange drink. It might not sound very appealing, but when astronaut John Glenn drank Tang during his historic first orbit of the Earth in 1962, every child knew they had to drink it. With Tang being the astronaut's drink, it quickly became a must-have beverage in every home. The power of advertising and its association with space transformed a simple powder into a symbol of pioneering and the dream of exploration. Space food sticks. If Tang was the astronaut's drink, then space food sticks were their food. These were a popular lunch item with a chewy texture and a slightly peanut butter-like taste. They were often found in children's lunchboxes, bringing a little taste of space into everyday meals. Like Tang, these foods represented children's fascination with space and the achievements of the space program. Bomb shelters and duck and cover drills. Bomb shelters, along with duck and cover drills, sitting down and shielding oneself, were quite common in the early 60s. This was due to the nuclear threat from the Soviet Union. President Kennedy even suggested building shelters in case of a nuclear exchange. Children would be taught how to react in case of a nuclear attack, seeking shelter under school desks or other sturdy objects. Yeah, like, how many of these do you recognize? Is there anything we missed that you'd like to add? If you felt moved recalling any detail in this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Back to Yesterday, so we have more motivation to continue preserving these wonderful memories. Please share your personal story. Your memories are a legacy that lives on.